All right, so I've been running into some issues with hooks. So what I decided to do is tonight just go through some lessons from Kent. It's not that long. It's 38 minutes. Last time it was an hour long, and it took me probably 4 hours, I think. So I hope it's not gonna take me that long. Oops. Some issues with hooks. So what I decided to do is tonight just. All right. Sorry about that for the feedback. So anyways, what we're gonna do tonight is just go through just the lesson again. One of the things that one of the setups in here is to go ahead and download the code base from GitHub. The easiest way for me to do this, instead of having to set up anything on my computer, is just quickly go and create a sandbox, and you can just feed a repo, and then immediately that can be downloaded. Sandbox downloads it and then deploys it for you and has something ready for you to preview. So that's pretty much what I'm doing. I'm gonna start with this layout and then we'll go from there. I might reduce a little bit more the item on the left, just to have more real estate. But let's see what we got tonight.
Introduce you to my new course all about React hooks and React suspense. Two new features in React that are both going to blow your socks off and enable our function components to do way more than they were ever capable of doing before. In this course, we're going to take an existing application and apply these features to that application. The reason I'm doing this is because I have realized that playing around with hooks by themselves is a lot of fun, making new components, playing around in a new little app or whatever. But then when we try to go and apply this new feature or these new features to our existing applications, we bump into some interesting edge cases and some interesting use cases that our components were already enabled to do, but we don't really know how to do those things with hooks. And so my hope is that as you watch me bump into those little problems in the process of this course, you'll be able to internalize some of those things and apply them as you're applying these features to your applications. One example of this is we have a render prop based component. Now, render prop based components are really awesome ways of sharing code in our applications today, but hooks are a much better and more capable way of sharing logic across components. And so we refactor our query component, is the render prompt based component, to a custom hook called useQuery. And in the process of doing that, our tests start breaking and we realize that our useEffect, which we are using to simulate the same kind of component did update, component did mount, component will unmount, it behaves slightly differently, and that is going to break our test. So we'll see how we can fix that. We'll also see how in an application, typically you have these reusable components. You're using them all over the code base, and you may not be able to have time to refactor all of your code base to use the new hook that you created. And so we'll see how we can wrap a hook in a component that exposes the same API that we had before we did the refactoring. And so we can continue to use that new component just the same way we were using the old one, and then we benefit from the hook for any of the parts of our code base that can use that new custom hook. We also take a look at the useRef hook that's built into React, useContext, useState, useReducer, useEffect, all of these different hooks that are built into React that are really, really useful for making our function components more capable than they were before. Also in this course, we look at the new suspense feature in React and how we can use that to lazy load our code, to code split our code, and load our components as they're needed. And so we don't ship as much to our user. So I'm excited about showing you how we can accomplish that using React Suspense and React.lazy. Anyway, I'm really excited about this course. I think you're going to love it. I think you're especially going to appreciate the practical application of this. You're going to see some edge cases and some weird situations which you'll probably bump into as you're applying these features to your own code base. So hopefully this is helpful to you. I'm pretty confident that you're going to love it and you're going to learn a lot. I hope you enjoy the course.
Thank you, Ken. Let's get on with it.
So let's start out by making a function called query, and we're going to take all of the same props that we took before.
All right, hold on 1 second. Where are we? Query extends components. So there's all right, so we started with share. So he has a query component, user, so source screens. Okay, here it is, user components. All right, and then inside it's gonna be query. Okay, there you go. All right, now we're on the same page.
So we'll say query.
All right, what I want to try to do as last time is try to follow as far as I can, and then pause it if it's getting too far, so that way we don't have to wait for the whole thing to we don't have to wait for me to type the whole thing over.
And variables and children and normalize. Awesome. And normalize has a default value, so we're just going to use the destructuring default value right there, and we've taken care of our props. Let's go ahead and pull the prop types onto our query now as a static property on that function. Then we can get rid of the prop types and the default props. Next up.
Whoa, wait a minute, that went a little bit too fast. All right, so
this off of set.
Sorry, I had to go back pretty far.
Use effect hook, so I'm going to pull it, use effect, then we'll come down here.
Wait, did I jump forward too
that
far?
implements that same kind of API. So
Okay. Alright, I didn't want to pause it that soon, but yeah, so alright, so here we are.
They use reducer.
Wait, oh. Man, did I miss the query prototypes? Yeah, I think I...
So we'll say query and variables and children and normalize. Awesome. And normalize has a default value, so we're just going to use the destructuring default value right there. And we've taken care of our props. Let's go ahead and pull the prop types onto our query now.
Nope. Okay.
Now as a static property on that function. Then we can get rid of the prop types. And the default props. Next, let's take care of the context type here.
All right.
Here, so we're going to pull in use context from here, and we'll get our client from use context github.context. Perfect, so we got rid of that. Now we need to take care of the state, and there are a couple ways we could go about doing this. One way we could do this is each one of these gets its own use state hook call, but instead I'm going to change this as minimally as possible. So what I'm going to do is actually we're going to pull in use reducer, and then in here I'm going to get my state, and I'm going to call this dispatch actually set state, because I'm going to make this set state function behave similar to how set state works in a class component. So here if we look, we're calling set state with an object here and an object here. So we're not using the function version of this set state API. So let's go ahead and implement a reducer that implements that same kind of API. So we'll say use reducer, and here we're going to get our state and the new state, and here we'll just merge in the state with a new state, and then we'll specify our initial state.
So reducer, wow. State, new state, and then, oops. All right.
State right here. Let's just pull that in from there.
And then we pass what we copy in there from below. All right.
And we've taken care of our state.
All right, state is out of there too. Yeah. Why is he giving us an error? Query extends component. Okay.
Now when this query component is mounted, it's going to call this query function, which basically just does all of this stuff. So let's copy this in to a use effect hook. So I'm going to
okay, so here's where we introduce the use effect.
pull in use effect, then we'll come down here, use effect, and in our callback here, we'll just paste all that stuff. And anywhere we see this, we can get rid of that. And because we implemented our use reducer to behave similarly to set state, we can actually just get rid of this off of set state.
All right, so use effect. Right. We're gonna remove this one. So it's gonna be this for everything, right?
And here we're using this safe set state, which we'll deal with later. We'll just call set state right now. And then we've also got this context. We're not going to need to get it from this anymore. We have access to it directly in our function. So I'll just get rid of that line. And now this client is referencing use context there. Cool. All right. So then instead of this.props, we're getting our props directly from the function signature. So I'm just going to pull this.props, all three of those places, and get rid of that there. And sweet, we're off to the races there.
Wow. Okay, I think I was able to duplicate everything. I think. Normalize stress. Alright.
Now the next thing that I need to do is when our component updates, we want to make that query again, and we're actually doing that every single time our component updates. This callback function is going to be called, but we actually only want to call this callback function when our query and our variables have changed. And we're doing that in our old class component here with component.update. We verify that the query and variables have changed, and if either one of those have, then we'll rerun the query. So we want to simulate that same behavior with our use effect hook. And so as a second argument to here, I'm going to pass in my query and variables.
That's going to be part of.
And so as a second argument, we verify that the query and variables have changed, and if either one of those have, then we'll rerun the query. So we want to simulate that same behavior with our use effect hook. And so as a second argument to here,
okay.
I'm going to pass in my query and variables. Perfect. All right, so we've taken care of component.mount with the exception of this underscore is mounted. We'll deal with that later.
Alright, component did mount, it's gonna go away.
And our component did update. Perfect. And then we got our component will unmount. We'll take care of that later. And then we took care of the query as well.
And a query as well. Oops. Come on.
And our safe set state, which we'll take care of later as well. So we're just left with a render, and that's basically what we return from our function here. It is just return, and we're no longer using this props anymore. We just return children with the state. That state directly from this use reducer. So that's just a variable in the closure of our.
Okay, and I think one thing that I noticed last time is that it was giving me an issue. Extends components render no. Query has already been declared. Where has query already been declared? Oh, I see on the top.
Our query component. Cool. So we have our context coming from use context. We're providing github.context, which we were using a context type before, and then we're also getting our state from use reducer. We initialize that state just as we were before, and with our new state and our state, we merge those together, similar to how this .set state works in React. Then we have this use effect, so that this callback will run when the component is mounted, and whenever the component is updated, in the case that query and variables has changed. So we're going to rerun this update callback.
Oh wait, one thing I think.
And with our new state and our state, we merge those together, similar to how this .set state works in React. Then we have this use effect, so that this callback will run when the component is mounted, and whenever the component is updated, in the case that.
And then right here, one thing that I'm missing. I have the feeling that I. Okay, so there's the query, and this again has to be moved up. Just catch an error. Okay, sorry, just modifying this, and then this one is return. Okay.
Query and variables has changed. So we're going to rerun this update callback every time one of those changes. And then we return our children prop. We're going to invoke that to provide this nice render prop API. Cool, so one last thing to do here is we'll get rid of that class component. We'll get rid of this component here. We'll also get rid of this lodash is equal. We'll save the file. And now if I try to go to can't see odds, we're loading that data, and everything is working just as it was before. We can go to Matt Zabriskie, and we load Matt's.
Well, let's see. It's asking me for somehow. Okay. Okay, so wants me to log in, put it on the side, of course. Oh, why is he asking me to authorize? No, I don't want to give. Cancel. Why do I want to authorize this way? Sorry, it just confused for a minute. React by wants to access your Hemogranda account. He wants access to my public repos, organizations and names, personal use data, profile information read only. Now we missed this step. I guess I haven't seen the previous the first class of tutorial, so we have not authorized it before, and this is the first time that this comes up. I thought maybe it was gonna ask me to authorize GitHub as a whole, but it seems like it wants me to authorize this GitHub profile. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do so on the side, or just move it on the side just in case I need to provide my password. Okay, so I authorize it. I'm just gonna go back and revoke the authorization once we're done with this. Okay, so now I am authorized. So I guess if I reload the page, maybe I didn't have to reload the page, I just have to reload the bottom section. Alright, while that is happening,
that class component,
let's finish this up.
We'll get rid of this component here. We'll also get rid of this Lodash is equal. We'll save the file. And now if I try to go to can't see odds, we're loading that data and everything is working just as it was before. We can go to Matt Zabriskie and we load Matt.
I don't know why it keeps asking me to log in. It's already authorized. Am I on the wrong page? What's the problem, Ken? Give for define but never use. React user effect is missing dependencies. Client and normalize. Either include them or remove the dependencies. Find the variant component defines to call back. GitHub is not defined. Yes, lent. Alright, so we should have the same setup. So far. But I can preview it for some reason. So we're just gonna continue.
How this .set state works in React. Then
Unfortunately, I can't really
so that this callback will run when the component is mounted and whenever the component is updated in the case that query and variables has changed. So we're going to rerun this update callback every time one of those changes. And then we return our children prop. We're going to invoke that to provide this nice render prop API.
Yeah, and this one is giving me other warnings. Client normalize, either include them or remove the dependency array.
Cool, so one last thing to do here is we'll get rid of that class component. We'll get rid of this component here. We'll also get rid of this Lodash is equal. We'll save the file. And now if I try to go to can't see odds, we're loading that data and everything is working just as it was before. We can go to Matt Zabriskie and we load Matt's data. And our API for our query component hasn't changed one little bit, but the implementation itself has changed and been made quite simpler by using React hooks like use context, use reducer, and use effect.
All right. So
With our
here's some
alt
errors
query
here, but
component, we were actually using this is equal from Lodash when we had this component to update to compare the previous query and the previous variables with the new query and the new variables. And we're doing that because the variables can actually be an object. So as we can see here, the variables is an object that is going to be created new every single time. And if we look at our use effects, we are comparing the query and the variables. React is doing that for us, but it's not going to do a shallow comparison. It's actually going to do a direct comparison. So it's going to say previous variables, which it is tracking itself, and it's going to check that against variables. And if that is not true, then it's going to rerun our callback. And that's not what we want, because this is actually always going to return false, because the way that people are using our component is they're passing this variable's object. So every single time it's a brand new object. So every single time our use effect callback is going to be called. So we need to do a little bit of extra work to make sure that that doesn't happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back import is equal from Lodash is equal. And then inside of my use effect hook, I'm basically going to simulate the same kind of thing that I was doing in is equal.
okay.
And then inside of my use effect hook, I'm basically going to simulate the same kind of thing that I was doing in here, which is not typically what we need to do, but in our situation, because we're comparing two objects and we need to make sure that they are deep equal, and we need to do a deep equality check on these, we're going to have to do it this way. So I'm going to say if is equal, and I need to get my previous inputs, and then my current inputs, which is query and variables. And then I'll actually get rid of this right here. So I'll have our effect callback called every time, and we'll do our own check.
Previous inputs. Previous. Did I misspell it? Previous?
Right here. So if they are equal, then we'll return. Now we need to find some way to know what the previous inputs were, because every single time this query is run, those inputs are going to change, and we need to keep a reference to what those previous inputs were. So we need to keep a reference. Let's try use ref.
Oh.
Down here below our use effect, we're going to say const previous inputs equals use ref, and we'll use use effect. So after every single time our component is rendered, we'll say previous inputs.current equals query and variables. Awesome. So then we're going to use the previous input.current rather than just simply previous inputs, and we'll compare the previous inputs with the new query and variables. And doing that, we can ensure that our effect is called every single time, but that we don't actually run our set state calls and our client calls unless the previous inputs are different from the new inputs. In review, what we did to make this work was we ensured that our effect is called
I just didn't have this right, so you have to come back and finish it up. All right.
Every time by removing the inputs argument here, and then we created a ref to keep track of the previous inputs on every render. Then we compared the previous inputs with the new ones, and if they are changed, then we'll go ahead and run our client to rerun the query.
All right.
One other thing that our previous class component could do that our new component does not do is, as this query is out in flight, there is a chance that our query component could be unmounted. And that's why we had this safe set state, which would keep track of the isMounted state. And if our component is mounted, then we'll go ahead and run set state. Otherwise, we won't. And we set that with this.isMounted is false, and our component will unmount. And this.isMounted is true, and our component did mount.
Okay.
We have to do this because the client that we're using does not support canceling requests. If it did, then that would be the proper solution to this problem. But because it doesn't, we're going to see problems like this. Let's go ahead and we'll open up our developer tools. I'm going to change us to a slow 3G network, and then I'm going to go to Kent C. Dodds. As it's loading our data for Kent C. Dodds, I'm going to go back. That post request finishes, and we're going to get this can't perform React state update on unmounted component. So let's go ahead and solve this problem by implementing something similar to our safe set state that we had before in our class component. So I'm going to go back here, and we're going to create a mounted ref. That's use ref is false. And then we'll use effect.
Oh, it looked a little bit different because of the layout, how it's broken up. Sorry.
And mounted ref.current will be true. So when this effect is run, then our component has mounted, and then we're going to return a cleanup function, and here we'll say mounted ref.current equals false. So when we clean up from this effect, our mounted ref.current will be false. Now we only want this to run once when our component is mounted, and then clean up when our component is unmounted. So we're going to pass it inputs, and there will be no inputs, and therefore our inputs will never change, meaning that this callback function will only be called one time when the component is mounted in the first place. And then our cleanup will be called inversely when the component is unmounted. And with that, we get the same effect that we had before with our underscore is mounted property on our class. So let's go ahead and I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to make a safe set state, and that's going to take any number of args, and it's going to say mounted ref.current. If it is, then we'll set state with our args. So then we'll use the safe set state in places where it could potentially have been unmounted with our args. Perfect. So then we'll use the safe set state in places where it could potentially have been unmounted. So both of these. We'll save that. Let's go back to being online. So we'll refresh, and then I'll switch us to slow. We'll do can't see dots again. It's loading our application. We're code splitting here. Now we're loading the data. I'll go back, and our GraphQL request finished, but we didn't get the warning that time because we didn't try to set state on a component that has been unmounted. So in review, to make this work, we had to track the mounted state of our component with this mounted ref, and then we created this safe set state method, which would check whether that component was mounted, and if it is, then we'll call the set state method. Again, this is generally not the way that you solve this problem. The better way to solve this problem would be to cancel this request so that this promise chain does not continue, but that is not supported by our client library, so we're going to go ahead and track.
Yeah, the only problem that I have here is that I don't know if it went too fast, but most likely that's what happened. It went too fast. So I'm not able to see where the safe set state is being used. And actually, the linter is warning me that it's being set, but we're not using it anywhere. And unfortunately, again, also I cannot test the app, so I can't see what's happening.
This promise chain does not continue, but that is not supported by our client library, so we're going to go ahead and track the mounted state of our component this way.
All right.
One of the cool things about React hooks is that it's really just JavaScript. This is just some JavaScript that we're running right here. This is some JavaScript. We're just calling a couple functions, and we can extract this into our own custom functions. So I'm going to take this logic right here, and I'm going to make a...
All right, so we're going to take, where is client? Oh, he down here. All right.
Use set state custom hook. So we'll say use set state, and then we'll just move this right up here, and then we can return state.
Yeah, this is the one that I wanted to look at because in my case, I'm running issues in trying to know, and that's something too that I didn't know, or I didn't notice that we are running the use effect multiple times. So anyways, that's something else that I'm learning in here, how to use them in this case. So anyways.
And set state, and then we can actually pull in our state and set state from use set state. Cool, and that was just a pure refactor, not really actually changing any behavior at all, just kind of moving code around. Now we want to make this actually generically useful, so having this loading, fetching, data, and error state in here as the initialized state doesn't really make sense in the context of other components, so I'm going to actually take this out, and we'll call this initial state, and then we'll put in initial state here, and then we'll pass that initial state to our call to use set state. And that's just another refactor, just kind of moving things around. But now we can use this use set state function.
All right, so the initial state. All right, so we're gonna pass the initial state here. I see.
Anywhere, and we can get an experience in refactoring other components in a way that's similar to the way setState works in React. Again, we're not supporting the updater function API from setState or the callback as the second argument to setState, but this is covering our use cases here, and we could add support for those later. Or we could actually use the npm module, use legacy setState, which is basically this. So the next thing that I want to do is, this also could be usefully generic, so I'm going to make a new hook here that's called useSafeSetState, and here it's going to take some initial state as well. And what we're going to do is I'm actually going to reuse this useSetState in here. So I'm going to get my state and setState, and we'll call useSetState with initial state, and then I'm going to take this mounted ref all the way down to the SafeSetState down here, and we'll just put it right there. And from
Alright, I'm gonna pause it right here so I can catch up. Const state set state initial state, and then he copy pretty much it. Okay.
Here we'll return state and safe set.
So we're returning again state and set state. Okay.
State, and then we can actually just use safe set state right here. And this can be safe set. State. Cool. And now we'll just update that set state call there.
Fetching true. Okay, that was one. Wow, I can't. Oh, it's probably all the way down here. Okay. Say state, set state, save set state.
To use safe set state instead, which will work just fine. And now we've been able to extract some generic code from our query component into these little custom hooks that kind of encapsulate.
Alright, so I'm encountering a big problem here. Save state has already been declared. Okay. I may have placed it in the wrong location. Let's go back and see where we are right here. So the initial state, yeah, there's not even line numbers, so it's kind of hard to see where to navigate. Okay, so query, okay, here it is. All right, use safe state.
Some specific use cases and are even composed together to form a really nice cohesive use safe set state hook. And really the way that we did this was we just moved some code around, made some functions, and then called those functions instead of the React hooks directly in our query. Now,
I have a feeling I missed one part right here, so I have to go back.
And that's just another refactor, just components. So I'm gonna actually take this out and we'll call this.
Okay, so use set state.
Initial state.
Right, we already have that.
Initial state
right,
here.
Right.
And then we'll pass that initial state to our call to use set state. And that's just another refactor, just kind of moving things around. But now we can use this use set state function anywhere, and we can get an experience in refactoring other components in a way that's similar to the way set state works in React. Again, we're not supporting the updater function API from set state or the callback as the second argument to set state, but this is covering our use cases here, and we could add support for those later. Or we could actually use the npm module, use legacy set state, which is basically this. So the next thing that I want to do is, this also could be usefully generic, so I'm going to make a new hook here that's called use safe set state.
Right.
And here it's going to take some initial state as well, And what we're going to do is I'm actually going to reuse this use set state in here. So I'm going to get my state and set state, and we'll call use set state with initial state. And
Okay,
then
so
I'm
we
going
just
to
passed
take
it
this
in.
mounted ref all the way down to the safe set state.
So, so that's what I did. I took it, didn't delete it. Okay.
Down here, and we'll just put it right there. And from here we'll return state and safe set state. And then we can actually just use safe set state right here. And this can be...
Okay, now I'm just have to look for this guide, function query. Where is it? And then client state, safe state, use
safe set state. Cool. And now we'll just update that set state call there to use safe set state instead.
Wait. There's one right below that I didn't see.
State and safe set state. And then we can actually just use safe set state right here.
Oh, it seems like I used it in the wrong place.
That state. And then we can actually just use safe sets.
Okay.
State right here. And this can be safe set state. Cool. And now we'll just update that set state call there.
Set state. And this one is also safe state, save, set state. Okay.
To use safe set state.
Did we skip this down here? I have the feeling that we skipped this too, but I may be wrong.
Then, which will work just fine. And now we've been able to extract some generic code from our query component into these little custom hooks that kind of encapsulate some specific use cases and are even composed together to form a really nice cohesive use safe set state hook. And really, the way that we did this was we just moved some code around, made some functions, and then called those functions instead of the React hooks directly in our query. Now if we save this and go here just to make sure that things are working, it is still working.
Again, sorry, but I can't preview it. It's asking me to log on.
So let's go ahead and take this a step further and extract some more hooks that could be potentially useful elsewhere in our codebase. Like this, for instance. It could be useful to be able to keep track of previous value over the course of renders. And so I'm going to take this, I'll pull this out entirely, and I'm going to make a...
Whoa, hold on one second. I just wanted to preview that. Let me go back over here.
I'll pull this
So we're going to get all this out of there.
out entirely, and I'm going to make a new hook called use previous, and that's going to take a previous value, and I'm going to paste that in there. We're going to get a ref, we'll just make this more generic, we'll just call it ref, and the current is going to be the value. And then what do we return? Well, let's just go ahead and return the ref.current. So we'll just return the current value. We don't need to return the entire ref. So now let's...
Oh, wait. Oh, man, you went up first. Alright, so in this one, we're going to use ref. Ref. We change it to ref, and then this one is going to be value. This is what we're going to be passing. Right.
Ref. So now let's go back in here. We'll say use previous, and we're going to get our previous inputs. And our inputs that we want to keep track of is this variable and query array here. And now we're getting the same thing that we had before, except we no longer need to use .current because this is the actual value that we care about.
Oh, we miss. Oh, well, I missed one right there. He went ahead. That's right, because we already handling the current in the other location, in the hook itself, pulling current from there. So this one goes away.
We no longer need to use .current because this is the actual value that we care about. So in review, to make use previous, we simply made a function that accepts a value. We created a ref to keep a reference of that previous value. And then in an effect, we have a callback that runs after every single time our component renders, where we update the current value to that value, and then we return ref.current. The component that's using this query component is actually a class component in itself. It's keeping track of a filter state, and it needs to get the context, and it needs to get the GitHub context, just like our query component did. So let's go ahead and change this to use hooks. I'm going to make a function called user, and that's going to take our props. We're only taking username, and that does not have a default, but we do have some.
Alright, we need to find out what file this is. It looks like it's screen user, but then we are not told. Oh, index user index, here it is. Alright, so I'll make sure we got the right one. Okay, so then we're going to look for class user, and right about class user is where we're gonna start working. Alright.
And that's going to take our props. We're only taking username, and that does not have a default, but we do have some prop types here, so I'll take those out, and we'll say user.proptypes equals that. And then let's take care of this GitHub context.
That, hold on, you went too fast in here. Which ones?
And then types here.
Okay.
So I'll take those out.
Wait, oh no, I killed it. Hold on. Well, this is something that happened last time too. If I pause too fast, oops, oh no.
Those out, and we'll say user.proptypes equals.
Yeah, I can't have it recover from that. Sorry everyone, but something for the team to watch.
Prop types here, so I'll
extend component. Okay. Oh, what's he complaining about? User. Oh, okay. Static prototypes and content type. So this is the only thing that you wanted us to take out of the way.
Take those out.
And we leave content type. Okay.
And we'll say user.proptypes equal.
Okay, and then we say user prop types equals. Just use that.
Equals that. And then let's take care of this GitHub context.
User extends GitHub context.
So we're gonna const client
username
int equals use context GitHub context. Let's pull in use context from React. Use context, and I also
component. Oh, whoa.
So notice we're going to want use state, so I'll just pull that in here while I'm up here. And next, let's go ahead and use that state. So we've taken care of this context, we'll take care of the state now. We just have one.
Okay, so then here we're going to use context get, oops, give for content, okay. It's going to be the client.
State, so I'm going to say filter and set filter equals use state. We'll initialize it to the same value that we were initializing it to before. And we've taken care of state initialization. And then we want to handle filter update. And that actually is a function that accepts the filter and sets the filter value. That looks suspiciously like the set filter. So we actually don't need to have a handle filter update. If we did, then we could just move this right up and make this a const. And
wow, that was cool, I must say. I have no idea how you did it, and I know it's probably because you're using VS Code, but we'll pretend that nothing happened, because I can do that with Code Sandbox.
And then use it as we had before. Change this to set filter with that filter. And that would work just as well, but that's basically just a pass-through function, so it's worthless. Let's just get rid of it. So next we have just a render. That's all that's left.
Wait. So which one do you delete?
Filter.
And the
And that
filter.
would work just as well, but that's
So we move that. I was impressed with how you move the code, and then we're just gonna remove it. Okay.
basically just a pass-through function, so it's worthless. Let's just get rid of it. So next we have just our render.
Okay.
But that's basically
Okay. So now, in here, it's still complaining that user has already been declared. Okay. Oh yeah, that's right.
just a pass-through function, so it's worthless. Let's just get rid of it.
Okay.
So next we
Yeah, that
have
was
just our
fun.
render. That's all that's left. So what I'm going to do is I'll just take this return all the way down to this closing parenthesis. And we'll put it right up here. Then I can get rid of the user class entirely. And we'll put it right
User, right here. I think that's
up here. Then I can get rid of the user class entirely. I'll hit save here. And now the last
Sorry, I was distracted.
get
Look,
rid of the
user. Did I copy it? I think I just copied it, right? Oh, okay.
user class entirely.
Okay, so we can get rid of all this now.
I'll hit save here. And now the last thing that we need to do to make sure that everything is working is look for this dot. If you find this dot anywhere in a component that should be a function component,
Row, column, this dot. Oh, that's right, this dot.
then you've got a problem there. You missed something in your refactor. And that's what we did. We missed this dot context dot logout. So what I'm actually going to do is I'll just get rid of this dot context. This logout is going to come from the client here, so I'll just destructure that logout. Let's look for this dot.
Man, sometimes you go a little bit fast in there. I maybe you're not expecting people to actually be duplicating all the code,
and
but
that's what we did. We missed this dot context dot logout. So what I'm actually going to do is I'll just get rid of this dot context. This logout is going to come from the client here.
okay.
So I'll just destructure that logout. Let's look for the this dot. Oh, there's another one. And this is that function that we saw that was totally
Right.
useless. So we're going to say set filter, and this on update is just going to call our set filter with the new filter. Cool. So now let's go look for this dot again. Looks like we are totally good to go. We can get rid of this component import now, and let's make sure that everything's working. So I'm going to just go can't see dots here, go, loading our data, and there it is. It's all working just like it was before, except it is using an arguably simpler function component. We have our context, we have our state, and we have the JSX that we're rendering. Now, this query component is a render prop API, and that makes it really nice.
All right, going back to user, index source, screen user, under screen user, and we stay in the index. Okay, so let's look for the user. Oh, there it is.
It's because we can declaratively use this query component, passing our query variables and our normalize function, and then get the state and render based off of that state. So it's a really nice API, but it is a little bit nested. And what if we could actually turn this query into a custom hook? This query isn't actually rendering anything. So what if instead of calling the children prop that we're passing it, it actually just returned these items of state? Let's take a look at what that might look like. So we're going to need these items of state. We'll just pull these out right here. Say const those. We'll destructure those off of use query. And then we'll want to pass all these values to useQuery, so we'll just JavaScriptize those really quick. Variables.
JavaScript size. Ooh, that's a new word, huh? Is he gonna do both? Fancy word by putting commas and periods in front of the content. Let me see if that's what we're aiming for.
An object, and then our normalize.
Oh, this is gonna be an object.
User data. Cool. And then with that, let's take this error all the way down to this closing parentheses, and we'll go from here to here and paste.
Whoa! Hold on. What happened?
With that, let's take this error all the way down to.
Okay, we're gonna take this error all the way down to.
This closing parentheses, and we'll go from here to here and paste.
Oh.
To this closing parentheses, and
The way that it navigates. So we went down, navigated to the bottom, but then we did not select what we were highlighting. So sometimes that can be confusing
we'll go
because we go back up and we're gonna do a selection of
from
what.
here to here.
Yeah, so then this one, where is this? Wow. How did this query become this username? And then fetching error. Okay, so something happened here. Oh, he deleted. Okay, sorry, just have to go very fast.
JavaScriptize those really quick.
Okay.
Variables will be an object, and then our
Sorry, we'll have to
will be
watch him.
normalize user data. Cool. And then with that, let's take
Error.
this error all the way down to this closing print.
And what do we do? Okay.
Parentheses. And we'll go from here to here and paste.
We go from here to here.
And we'll go from here to here.
Okay, so the whole return, we're gonna replace the return bar. Okay.
Here and paste that in. And wow, that's a lot less nested. It's actually quite a bit easier to read. And if we had multiple of these render prop based APIs, we could maybe change them to be hooks as well and have even less nesting. And our tree would be a lot smaller, which would be good too. Sweet, let's go ahead and make this happen. So I'm gonna take this use query, I'm gonna scroll up here to the top where I'm importing query, and I'm going to do a named import for use query. Now let's go back to our query component here and let's do a named import for use query. Now let's go back to our query component here and let's make this a custom hook. So instead of query, we're gonna do use query, and instead of children, we're going to just simply return the state. And then we can have export use query.
Whoa, wait.
State, use query. Let's make this a custom.
Did I already change it?
To our query component here, and let's make this a
client GitHub. Where is it? Where is that? Oh, I wonder if you'd change it for me. Query. Where is this function query? Oh, where are they? Wait, we started on the index file
here and paste that in. And
okay.
Wow, that's a lot less nested. It's actually quite a bit easier to read. And if we had multiple of these render prop based APIs. We could maybe change them to be hooks as well and have even less nesting. And our tree would be a lot smaller, which would be good too.
Okay.
Sweet. Let's go ahead and make this happen. So I'm going to take this use query. I'm going to scroll up here to the top where I'm importing query. And I'm going to do a named import for use query. Now let's go back to our query component here and let's make
okay,
this.
so you did say, let's go to our query component. Okay, I want to save that, and then I want to go to the query component. Sorry, I completely missed that. Okay, so we're in the query
custom
component.
hook. So instead of query, we're going to do use query, and instead of children, we're going to just simply return the state. And then we can
Sorry, I need to
we're
follow.
going to do use query, custom hook. So instead of query, we're going to do use query, and instead of children, we're going to just simply return the state. And then we can have export use query. Now we probably aren't going to be able to refactor our entire application, and we're going to, instead of children, we're going to do use query.
Okay, let's go back here because I had data. Okay, there, comma, children, query variables. Okay, so this was even different right
And
there.
instead of children, we're going to just simply return the state. And then we can have export use query. Now we probably aren't going to be able to refactor our entire application to be using this new custom use query. And then we can have export use query. Now we probably not going to be able to refactor our entire application to be using this new custom use query. We probably will still have some areas of the application that need to have a render prop based API of this query component. So let's go ahead and make that. We'll just say const query equals a function component that has children, and then it takes a bunch of other props as it was before. And here we'll just call children with use query props. And that's identical to what we had before. We've done a simple refactor. Nothing has changed for the users of this query component. If we save that, we can even take a look at our tests and our test.
Hold on. Do we have the same? Is query equals, okay, children, comma, props, children, wait, that's how it is. Const query equals children object children props children. Okay.
This query component. If we save that, we can even take a look at our tests, and our tests are still passing as well, because our tests are actually using our query component. And actually, this is the way that I prefer to test custom hooks, is by creating a render prop based API out of them, and then rendering that render prop based API and testing it like a regular React component. In review, to make this work, we went to our user situation. We took all the contents of the children prop, the things that we were returning from the children function, and we simply returned that, and then we got the data we needed from the use query from the custom hook version of our render prop based component. We plucked off the data that we needed in our render, and we provided as an object the options that this custom hook needs. And then to make that work in our custom hook, we simply renamed this to use query. We removed the children prop, and we treated this as a regular options object. And then instead of returning a call to children and passing the state, we simply return the state. And then to make this easier to test and to ensure other places in the application can continue to use the render prop based query component, we created a very simple render prop based query component that simply uses the use query hook.
Yeah, and the last part I didn't see what you did with previous inputs.
Let's go ahead and refactor this GitHub client provider. So I'm going to make a function called GitHub client provider. It's going to take some prompts, and then we need to initialize our.
All right, let's go find history.
Our state. Now, this one's a little bit interesting because we've got some if statements here. We're conditionally initializing our state. We're even reaching into local storage, which is something we don't really want to do every single time we render. So we'll take a look at that here in a sec. For our error state, though, that's pretty easy. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go up here to the top. We'll pull in use state, and we'll come back down here. We'll get our error and set error. That'll be use state. We want to initialize it to the same thing that we had before. Null. Perfect. All right, so then let's go ahead and I'm just going to move, and then we'll make that a function.
Whoa, how do we
Perfect.
jump?
If there's
No, it's not perfect. You need to rewind. There you go. Oh no. I kill you again. Sorry. Sorry.
client and move that up here. So let's do that. I'm gonna just down here, we'll cut that out, and we'll
even before that,
actually take an initializer. So we're gonna provide it a function, and whatever this function
okay,
here,
I think
we'll get our error and set error. That'll be use state. We want to
and then what state do we want to initialize it
the
with?
same thing that we had before.
No. That's where it was.
No. Perfect.
Okay, so now I can remove this state. I gotta guess.
Alright, so then let's go ahead and I'm just gonna move.
Whoa, that was another thing that was cool. This client to the constructor. Wait, what happened? Oh, wow. We're getting fancy here, which is great because then I don't know where I'm going. Okay, so I remove this guy and I'm gonna move it up to where?
Move this up right here.
Oh, I see. That's what we're trying to do. I'm still old school. I copy and paste it, I guess.
And we could do this and initialize our client to this. I just don't really like this code right in here. I feel like this could...
You don't like it? Let's find out who wrote it originally. That's what I was wondering.
It'd be a bit of a performance problem. We're reaching into local storage every single time.
Right. What a mess.
It's not a big deal.
What a mess.
But I would rather avoid that. So let's go ahead and get our client and set client functions here with use state.
Alright, so we have the error. And then what we're gonna do?
And useState can actually take an initializer. So we're gonna provide it a function, and whatever this function returns will be used as the initial value for our client. And React will only call this function the first time a given component is rendered. So that's perfect for our use case because we only really want to reach into local storage the first time, which is what we were doing in the constructor. It only reached into local storage that first time when the component is actually being initialized. So this is great. Let's move this up inside of that function. And instead of...
I want to be fancy, but I don't want to mess up my code, so I'm not going to be fancy.
This dot props, anywhere you see this dot in a function component, that's wrong. You want to get rid of it. So we're going to do props dot client. We're going to get the client from the props. And if there is a props client, then we'll simply return it. And that props client is what's going to be used as our initial state for the client. Perfect. If there's not a props client, we'll reach into local storage. If there's a token, then we're going to get the client from this .get client. So let's return that instead.
we said, oops.
And we've got a this dot in here, so we're gonna need to have that get client move that up here. So let's do that.
Okay, client is over here.
I'm gonna just reach down here, we'll cut that out, and we'll paste that right here.
Inside 1 2 3, yeah, so this is something that I was confused about because well, we'll see. I want to get too ahead of myself.
And then we'll make that a function. Perfect. And instead of this dot get client, we'll just call get client because it's right in the same closure.
Right.
No need for this. Cool. So
Huh.
so far so good. Let's go ahead and take a look at the rest. So we got rid of our constructor. Now we have a component did mount.
A real constructor, component did mount, use.
That's gonna be
the
a
use
effect.
Ooh, we're learning. Wait.
So inside of our use effect, we'll do all the same things that we did in our component to mount. We'll just move that right up. And it's important to remember that use effect is not an exact match to component did mount. Use effect is actually kind of a combination between component did mount and component will unmount, as well as component did update. Another difference here is that our use effect callback will actually run sometime after the render has happened and not synchronously, whereas our component did mount will run synchronously right after the render has happened. So those subtle differences are important to remember as you're making these refactors, and sometimes you may actually need to use layout effect rather than use effect, depending on your use case. But go ahead and start with use effect because it will generally be better for performance. Okay, so we've moved our component did mount up into our use effect. Let's go ahead and bring in use effect because that red underline is bothering me. So we'll bring in the use effect. And now we've got some this dot going on each here, so let's get rid of all that stuff. This dot state we can just get rid of entirely because we have got our client and we can reference directly from our use state call up here. Perfect.
Sorry, I was importing the package.
Use effect because that red underline is bothering me. So we'll bring in the use effect. And now we've got some this dot going on each here, so let's get rid of all that stuff. This dot's
use effect. Okay, so we go back to where the use effect. Okay, here it is.
State we can just get rid of entirely because we have got our client and we can reference directly from our use state call up here. Perfect. So then we're doing a this dot unsubscribe history is assigned to that history.listen. So the only reason that we did this dot unsubscribe history is so that we could reference it in our component will unmount. Well, thankfully, hooks allow you to do your setup and your teardown or your cleanup in the same callback. So we could actually just do const unsubscribe history, and then we'll return a function called cleanup. That doesn't accept any parameters, but we can call unsubscribe history right there. No reason to make an instance property anymore here. Great, so we're making good progress. We took care of our component did mount and our component will unmount. Now an important thing here is we don't have a component did update, so we only want our effect to run on mount and unmount. We don't want to have that effect callback run on every update. And that makes sense because we only want to do all of this stuff one time. We only need to set up a subscription to history once. We only need to check the client on mount and then history Our history listen callback will take care of the rest of the time as the user's navigating around to redirect them to the home page if the user's not logged in, so we don't have a client. So to make this only run on mount and component will unmount, we'll provide it an array of inputs where that array is empty, so nothing in that array can possibly change. So therefore, our callback will only be called once, and our cleanup will only be called on unmount. So now we've simulated the same thing that we had in component did mount, and component will unmount. Next here we've got logout and login, and those are functions that were being referenced in our get client. So let's go ahead and pull those out. We'll pull both of these, just cut them out, and put them right up here. And we'll convert both of these into
after the okay, right before
a function. And login is an async function. And then instead of this dot, which you never want to have in a function component, we'll just use a reference to those variables directly. And we'll use object shorthand.
Whoa, wait a minute. Give me a second,
just
please.
Cut them out.
You went too fast.
We'll pull both of these, just cut them out.
Oh no, I broke it again.
Right up here.
Okay, around minute number 5,
And
about 5:30. That's when it
both of
broke.
Let's go ahead and refactor this.
Oh no! Oh, is it maybe whenever not everything is loaded, it seems that that's where it's giving us an issue. I don't know. We'll try it again.
Let's go ahead and refactor this GitHub client provider. So I'm going to make a function called GitHub client provider. It's going to as our initial state for the client.
Yeah.
Perfect. If there's not a props client, we'll reach into local storage. If there's a token, with layout effect rather than use effect, depending on your use case. But go ahead and start with use effect because it will generally be better for performance. Okay, so now we've simulated this.
Oh no, it's one of those. I had similar issue with another video. There's something in there, but I don't know. I really don't know what's happening. But anyways,
let's go ahead and
we'll try one more time. Jump all over
the
there.
rest of the time
Okay, I'm not at the jail.
Navigating around to redirect them to the home page if the user's not logged in, so we don't have a client. So to make this only run on mount and component will unmount, we'll provide it an array of inputs where that array is empty, so nothing in that array can possibly change. So therefore, our callback will only be called once, and our cleanup will only be called on unmount. So now we've simulated the same thing that we had in component did mount, and component will unmount. Next here we've got logout and login, and those are functions that were being referenced in our get client. So let's go ahead and pull those out. We'll pull both of these, just cut them out, and put them right up here. And we'll convert both of these into a function.
Mm-hmm.
And login is an async function. And then instead of this dot, which you never want to have in a function component, we'll just use a reference to those variables directly. And we'll use object.
Log out and then log in. All this and then object assign. Oh, okay. Oh, what did you do?
Object shorthand is.
Oh, we just sure.
So let's take a look at these. We have this.setState to set the client and error to null. So now we'll just say set client null and set error null and get rid of that call to this.setState. And then we have a this.setState here to set error to that error object that we get when we're logging in. And we have
data wait, oh no. What did you do there? Something happened here. Set state, set error.
have a this.setState to set the client. So let's do set client
What are we setting the client to?
is get client with the data token. Cool, so we've successfully moved logout and login, and all we have left is the render. And the render is probably the easiest one to pull out.
Oh,
We'll just take it from here.
easiest one is the render. Oh, this is the return. Sorry. I'm looking for render. Where is render? I don't even want to move it because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up again. Okay, give for provider.
And login, and all we have left is the render. And the render is probably the easiest one to pull out. We'll just take it from here to here.
Okay, so yeah, so he's pretty much pulled it all out.
Here, and we'll return.
Those jumps go so fast. Okay.
That same thing. Then we can get rid of the class, and we'll save, and we're all set. Let's take a look at this children here. We need to get that from props.children, and now we'll take a look at our app. If I go to mzabriskie, we've loaded the data successfully with the client that the GitHub client provider provided for us. It's awesome, and we didn't have to actually change how this component is being used. This was just a clean refactor, taking all of the stuff from the class and changing it into using hooks and a function component. And it's arguably a lot simpler code because now our use effect that used to be represented by a component did mount and component will unmount is all represented in this single use effect callback. And our login and logout and get client can all be right here, just referencing those functions directly. And we can call a use state with a function to ensure that this code only runs the first time this GitHub client provider is being rendered. So here we're using React Loadable to load different parts of our application. We've got the home and we've got the user page, and then we
source index. Alright, we're gonna ignore this a little bit. I did notice it. I think I brought it in specific area that is complained about, but we'll leave it for that right now. Okay.
We can just render those components as they are with the reach router, and when they're ready, they'll be rendered. But React actually has built in the capability to do lots of what Loadable is doing for us. So here we're using React Loadable to dynamically import our home and user pages so that we can leverage code splitting and make our users download less of our application all at once. And here we're rendering those home and user components inside of our reach router. Let's go ahead and refactor our React Loadable usage to use React Lazy, which is built into React. So instead of home being assigned to Loadable, we're going to say home is assigned to react.lazy of that same import. And we'll do the same thing for our user. React.lazy of that import. Cool.
Okay, so something happened here.
Of that
so equals, okay, I'm gonna have to put it over here. Const home equals react lazy import and then screens home. All right. And then user, and then the same thing for user.
Import. Cool, so we can get rid of Loadable right here. And if we save this and go over here, we're going to get a big error that says a component suspended while rendering, but no fallback UI was specified. So we need to add a suspense fallback component higher in the tree to provide a loading indicator or some sort of placeholder to display. So what we need to do is I'm going to pull in suspense from React. And down here, we'll put
man.
this suspense from React. And down here, we'll put this right below our error boundary, and we'll stick the router inside of our suspense right there. And then we'll provide a fallback, and
That's so crazy. I didn't know about suspense until right now, so this is great.
fallback UI that we want to provide is the same thing that we had before, except we don't need to deal with this error state anymore because this is actually the way that suspense will work. If an error is thrown, then suspense will throw it and our error boundary will catch it. So we'll take this loading message page as our fallback and stick it right there.
I see. I'm gonna pass an object. Loading application message. Did we empty the one above?
Throw it and our error boundary will catch it. So we'll take this loading message page as our fallback and stick it right there. And then we can get rid of this loading fallback as well. We'll save that, and now we're loading our stuff. If I refresh, then I can see Kenzie Dodds, and I go, and I get my loading data for Kenzie Dodds. In review, mostly what we did is just remove a whole bunch of code. We're importing suspense and using React.lazy,
the whole thing.
and then we provide our suspense right here, somewhere above where we're using React.lazy components, and we're providing a fallback for the loading message page of the loading application. So we're treating our users right by using React.lazy to dynamically import the JavaScript that the user is going to need eventually, depending on the area of the app that they're going to go to. So we only load the home and only load the user when those are actually going to be rendered. But this can lead to a bit of a problem for users on slow connections. If we go in here and we'll switch us down to a slow 3G, and then I say Kenzie Dodds, for example, then we'll go, we're going to load the application, and it's going to sit there for a little while before we start loading the data. So it'd be really nice if we could preload the user page when we're on the home page, because we can assume with pretty good confidence that a user that's on the home page is going to go to the user page next. So one trick that we can do is if we go into our screens home index.js here, we can import use effect from React, and then I'll take that use effect in my home, and I'll have an effect that runs only one time when the component mounts, and when this component mounts, we'll preload the next page. So how are we going to do that? Well, with the way that Webpack works, we can actually just do an import for that user page, and Webpack will start loading that as soon as this home page has been loaded. So let's take a look at what this does now. If I pop open my developer tools and I refresh here, I'm going to see that I'm loading my bundle, my chunks, and then once this page is loaded, we're actually going to follow up with a request for our other chunks that we need for the user page. So if I go down to a slow connection again, we clear this out and I click go, we're actually immediately going to be making that request for the GraphQL data rather than having to make a request for the rest of the application, which works perfectly for our use case because we know that users who are going to the home page are going to go to the users page next. So it makes a lot of sense to preload the JavaScript for the next page while the user is filling out this form.
All right. Well, that was a wild ride on this lesson. I don't know how long actually it took me to, I think, let me see. Yeah, I don't know exactly how long it is. Oh, an hour and 30 minutes. So now we know about 30 minutes. It takes about an hour and a half. Just maybe some hiccups, copying code, stuff like that. Overall, I think that I'm gonna have to go back and look at some of these stuff. Amazing examples. I loved it. The ability to be able to see current code and then incorporate it or how to transform it. Many times what happens is that we get taught of how to do something, but we don't have a reference of how it was before and to how it looks now. So this way we're able to see, okay, this is what the application looked like before, and this is what the application will look like once we made the modifications.
And the beauty also of this, unfortunately, I can't get it to work on my computer, or at least on this server, is that I cannot have the application run. So the problem with that is that I can't see what's happening. But I was able to see running on Ken's page or on his server or on his local environment, whatever, and then be able to see how he's able to continue running, which is ideal because we want to make the transformations and the application. We don't want to break the application, right? We want to make the improvements without breaking the application. So that was great. So yeah, I mean, overall, great. We flew through some places. There's some times when the idea of jumping from one file to another was pretty fast. But overall, I mean, I'm pretty happy with this. Kind of opened my eyes also on some of the stuff, how I was trying to incorporate it into the application that I'm working on. So yeah, amazing tutorial. So if you have a chance to take it on your own,